Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of OverVoice Season 3. Today I am joined by the lovely and illustrious Jett Barker. Jett, would you like to introduce yourself, my friend?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jett. I am a British American voice actor based in Los Angeles, California. Um, I come from a theater and musicianship background, and I'm just happy to ramble and hang out.
Hey, happy to be here. I'm happy for you to be here. Thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. But yeah, first question. I did not know you did theater. Do you have a favorite play or musical or anything?
So I am, gosh, so I'm both a Shakespeare nerd and a musical theater nerd. I would say within Shakespearean comedies. I'm a fan of Cymbeline. Midsummer is an easy go to. The Tempest, it doesn't count to some people, but if you want to count it, then count it. For tragedies, I'm a big fan of King Lear and Richard
Yes.
III and the Scottish play. And for musicals, I'm a Sondheim person. I'm a big fan of Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz as well. So, yeah.
Hell yeah. I actually did a King Lear production last year. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, nice. Who did you play?
Okay, so this was like a proper professional stage production. So I was just a lot of ensemble characters.
Nice.
So like,
No, it's not, it's not really a matter of just like you got to hang out.
yeah, it was really fun. But like in
Yeah.
high school, I got to do King Lear. Then that was my first time doing King Lear, and I actually got to play King Lear.
Oh,
That was
nice.
that was like for like passing grade. I think I got top marks there, so I think I did a good job. But it's different from high
What
school
a
acting to actual professional theater acting.
Yeah, what a responsibility to levy at some teenager. Just like, by the way, here's King Lear.
Yeah, I really do enjoy Shakespeare though. I enjoy doing it. I don't know if I like watching it. I like getting involved in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say my thing is that it matters a lot how it's performed, and I know for me personally, my go-to answer if you could snap your fingers and make the pandemic go away for 48 hours, what would you do? My go-to response to that is I would go to a symphony concert and probably just cry. But the other thing I would really love to do if I had the like time and bandwidth to manage to finagle my way into it is I would love to see a Shakespeare production done in the original pronunciation because
Mm.
I've I've watched recorded versions of that and I find it beautiful, but I've never seen it in person. I'm a bad dual citizen. I've only been on the other side of the Atlantic once, and it was a very long time ago.
No, that's fair enough. I'm sure you'll see one at some point. Shakespeare's not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, my actual first question to you now is voice acting question now. Let's that's why we're here to speak about voiceover and other random shit that happens. But yeah, my first question to you is a question I ask every voice actor is how did you get started with voice acting and what's your journey been like?
Yeah, so I mean for me it was sort of funny because I grew up very much appreciating theater, but never thought that I'd be able to be an actor. I had profound secondhand embarrassment for actors, um,
Oh,
and I really discovered that voice acting was something that people could do for a living as as a child as DVDs started to become more of a thing and bonus features on DVDs became more of a thing. It was this is how we make all of these things. Um, I watched and rewatched like the Lord of the Rings appendices religiously as a teenager, um, and so just sort of looking at the production process for both live action and animated, filmmaking and television production and things like that, I was like, oh, interesting. My introduction to voice acting personally was very odd because I was a teenager who was allowed to take two 8-hour workshops in studio in San Francisco.
yo,
um, they were not designed for minors, but it was very much the instructor went, you're a pianist. Your ADR sync's gonna be good, and you seem like enough of an anxious mess that you'll be low maintenance. Whatever, you can come. And so that was my introduction was doing ADR in a very fancy padded room in San
Nice.
Francisco.
Damn, that's amazing. Because you used to live in San Francisco, but now you live in LA. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So I was born in Dallas. My mom is from San Diego. My dad is from Yorkshire, and they left California because they essentially went, we'll never be able to afford housing, and that was in 1990X,
Oh,
and
topical.
and smash cut forward, almost 30 years later, and it's just like,
Damn.
affordable housing in this economy. But yeah, so my parents and I moved in my early teens from Dallas to the Bay Area. Um, and so I was there and I took those workshops and I essentially went, yeah, this is what I want to do for a living, because I was conflicted at that point between, do I want to go into performing arts and specifically voice acting, or do I want to go into astrophysics, because those two things are so very related.
Oh wow.
And so I basically I took those classes and I went, okay, this is what I want to do for a living, so what do I need to do? And I was young enough at the time that I still had the opportunity to plan and to like during the summer I took like a community college course that was basically intro to Stanislavski, but it was more method of physical action type of things, which is great because that interlinks very, very nicely into like Michael Chekhov's
Mm.
later sort of theory and acting methodologies, which work really well for me. Um, but so I was hoarding knowledge then, and then when I went to university, I could go, okay, I'm going to be a theater major and a computer science minor. And then all 4 years, because nobody in the music department was using the music department scholarship funds, I did essentially a scholarship audition type thing every
Ooh,
single term,
nice.
um, so that then I could take classical singing lessons all 4 years for basically no money aside from like the cost of printing repertoire. Uh, so yeah, I mean, at that point, it was pretty much just, yeah, I mean, this all makes sense. Worked in tech for a bit, mostly to squirrel away funds because I went, I need to move eventually, and would like to be able to work remotely if I can. Because I mean, I when I started out, it was people were still burning their demos to CD. That was already
Oh,
starting to go the way of the dodo, and we all knew it, but it hadn't happened yet. And so it went from you will go in studio places to audition. The horror story that I was told about Leprechaun Man, which is
okay.
not which is not my story to tell, and the person who experienced it tells it much better than I do. But the horror story about Leprechaun Man literally cannot happen anymore because people are not auditioning in studio. And so the environment just shifted gradually but dramatically, such that I was like, yeah, there are certain logistical things that I need to sort of straighten out. Um, so yeah, I mean, people would look at me and go, "You're a theater major and a computer science minor. How does that work?" And at this point, it's, oh, that's how it works.
No, fair enough. I don't think I've done a live in-person audition since like 2022. I've only done it once, but it is it's something. It's something I still have to kind of get used to. Um, oh, I mean, it's not dissimilar from like acting in front of people in a class or something. But like when you're like physically in there, in person in front of like the director that's hearing you and is like it's like no sound apart from your own. It is
Oh,
it's a little bit daunting, but like it's usually pretty comfortable. I think the more you do it, I don't think it's super common anymore, like you said. But
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating to me because if a standard studio environment's noise floor is around -80, which is like a rough ballpark. Obviously, environments vary. Um, my noise floor, without me being in my booth, is negative 75. But the layout of the exterior, because this is a double walled enclosure, the layout of the exterior is such that if there's a massive truck in the alleyway betwixt my buildings, I might be able to hear it a little bit, not the rumble, but the very high pitched beep. Hilariously, the high pitched beep does not pierce through, but very occasionally, if it gets obnoxiously close, the rumble will just ever so slightly show up. But in an in studio environment, you hear no interference from where you are, but your engineer might hold down the button and go, "Hang on, low flying plane." And then you just wait.
Yeah.
Especially in Burbank, because there's an airport right there, which, life hacks you didn't know you needed. If you're flying into LA, don't fly into LAX. If you can fly into Bob Hope in Burbank, it's way easier.
But Miley Cyrus is to hop off the plane at LAX,
I mean, you can. It's just if you have friends picking you up, parking is a nightmare.
At the airport? Actually, no, you know what? That actually makes sense. Airport parking it sounds horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
It usually is most of the time. Um, but yeah, you mentioned that you're a dual citizen for US and the UK. That's a power couple right there. Do
Yeah.
you ever have you been to the UK a couple times?
So I'm a bad dual citizen. I've only been once. And I was over there for about 3 weeks, and it's funny because especially growing up, I would because I make the joke that I'm 3.5 accents in a trench coat, but it all averages out to where it's like you sound American, but just every once in a while something goes a little bit wrong, and but I mean, especially over there, even my dad, who to American listeners sounds fairly posh, which is very funny because he's from Yorkshire. He's the most posh Yorkshireman you will meet in your life. And to Americans, he sounds very posh. To all people in England, he sounds American, and so he is truly Schrodinger's Brit in that regard.
Mm.
No matter what, I always parse as mostly American, except then people look at my cadence, or they look at my vowel color, or they look at my liquid use, or my hyperroticity, and they go, "That's a little weird." But you kind of have to know what you're listening for, um, or it's me panicking on Twitch, and I sound vaguely Irish, despite not being able to do an Irish accent, because
Interesting.
my brain is halfway between my normal state and my code switch, and so my R is doing something even stranger than what it normally does.
Interesting. My one of my friends, he's British, and he goes scouse when he's scared. It's really funny.
Yeah, the most reliable way to get me to code switch around people I don't know is actually to get me playing Mario Kart, and
Oh, yep.
it's not even because I rage. It's just that something surprises me, and that does it.
I think it's yeah similar. I mean, if I think it's more rage, like the more rage, like the my New Zealand accent comes out. Sometimes it comes out when I'm relaxed, but yeah. See, like now it just you can kind of hear it, but no, it's more like Americanized New Zealand or New Zealand American right now, but it's very useful in terms of like enunciating because I used to mumble a lot because New Zealand's jaw for like their accent is very lazy. So
Yeah.
and if you mix that with a fast talking like Indian family speaking environment, you're not gonna say words, you know.
Yeah, it's just these are noises. Maybe they'll parse as comprehensible 10% of the time.
Exactly. I like back then I could have just said like anything and people would be like, "Oh yeah, bars. You spit it." But yeah, would you want to go back to the UK anytime soon?
um I mean, if I had the opportunity to, I know for me personally, especially with living on the west coast of the U.S., I would have to basically do it in 2 flight trips, purely
Mm,
from the perspective of I'm physically disabled. If I sit for that long, very strange, objectively interesting, but functionally not advantageous things will happen to my body.
mm.
So it would very much be a you know SoCal to New York, New York to say London Heathrow or wherever else.
Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean there are logistical constraints, and quite frankly, being immunocompromised, going on planes isn't really a thing that I'm doing right now.
Not
Uh,
fair.
but yeah, no, I mean long term, I would love to go back.
Yeah. And I'm sure there'll be like there's just should be I'm hoping that, someday there's like a teleporter. You can just teleport to England. No planes. Nothing. I
Maximum efficiency.
exactly. The only thing I worry about teleporters is like getting the DNA right, and then from one place to point B, because that always scares me, right? Because if you go to like a faulty teleporter and your DNA gets mixed up during the teleportation trip, you can be like fucked up. That Loki kind of scares me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean there's also just the philosophical argument of if you dematerialize in a teleporter and then rematerialize on the other side, do you still count as the original you?
Oh, I've never
Um
thought about it like that.
yeah, yeah. So that's the existential so but yes, it
Interesting.
would be much faster.
Yeah, I last time I went to the UK was 2011, so that was over 10 years ago. I had a good time there. I'm planning to make a trip next year, but the thing is, it's the plane thing. Like I don't hate planes, but like for New Zealand to London,
Oh, it's
I'm gonna have to
brutal.
be in there for like on the air for like 24 hours,
Yeah,
maybe
it's
even more than that.
brutal. It's
So like
brutal.
yeah, and I can't sleep on planes, so like I'm gonna be awake for a full day
Oh,
if that happens.
no.
I just can't do it, man. I just can't. I can power nap like an hour, but like otherwise, I'll be awake the entire time.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because planes like uncomfy because I had to you kind of have to like sit up straight. At least that's my luck because sometimes you can lean back a bit, but unfortunately, most of the time I have this shitty luck where some kid's gonna sit behind me, lean all the way back, and start kicking my chair. So that's
Oh, yeah.
happens nearly every time. So like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, my dad is very tall, relative to, like normal economy class seating. So that's his major hang up if he's flying in that like seat layout, which is common,
Yeah.
is that if it's a long flight, he's like, I just can't sleep. I don't have enough space to put my legs, and so
Mm.
I'm not going to sleep like curled into a ball. I'm like, well, I understand that, but at the same time, as somebody who can no longer curl into a ball, I'm a little jealous.
No, fair enough. I mean, if I'm sitting on a plane, I'll have to sort of lean to the window if I want to sleep because if I'm in the middle and I don't know any of the people like
Oh
next to me,
yeah, yeah.
I
Then
am
you're
not
just
leaning on
drifting
them.
onto, yeah, no,
I'm not doing that. I don't think it's
no.
happened before. I don't want it to happen. I just noticed over your pop filter, you got a little is that like a sock or something?
Yes, so I actually I have a second pop filter. So the pop filter that has the sock on it, this one, is in my actual shock mount here, and then I have another one that is on sort of a wire arm over top of it. So initially it was just the metal screen, and then now I have horrible theater person plosives, and especially with using a 103, it's twitchy enough to where I was having problems with just my overall plosivity. And so I went, okay, until I can drop, the extra money on the nice pop filter that I know is strong enough to withstand my nonsense, I may as well just add a little bit of extra barrier. So yes, that is a thin sock with a cat on it. It does not affect the signal transmission at all, and even having my second denser, sort of spongy pop filter in front of it, still no effect on the signal transmission.
Oh, that's good. That's actually really good. I was trying to decipher what kind of cat was that. I was thinking, was that Grumpy Cat? I don't know. It's been so
No,
long.
it's just a random cat. It sort of reminds me of this one cat that looks like he's wearing mascara. His name is Wilfred, and there was that video that somebody recorded narration over, going, "Hey ma, that cat's back outside, ma. Bring in the dogs. That cat's back outside." So like from when that went viral years ago, uh, Wilfred sort of kept bouncing around in my head, and I happened to see those socks, and I was like, oh, it kind of looks like Wilfred on socks, but they're the type of sock, unfortunately, because its sibling is not paired with it, clearly.
Ah, oh man.
Um,
But someday, I hope.
but they're sadly the type of sock where they'll just slowly start sliding halfway down your foot as you're wearing your shoes. So I was like,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
I have no qualms about sacrificing you to this pop filter.
Honestly, that's fair. I mean, I don't know why, but that sounds relaxing to me. But like the sock slowly comes off. That means it's so smooth that it just slides off. I don't know why that sounds relaxing. It sounds like buttery. I don't know why, but like not. But I don't know why. But it's like it shouldn't be buttery, but
No, they always end up like rolling over on themselves on my feet, and I'm just like, this is miserable.
oh, oh man. I also wanted to ask because you live in LA. Because you mentioned Burbank. Is that right? Burbank, California.
Yeah, so Burbank is, I'm not in Burbank itself. I am about 20 minutes northwest.
Mm.
And a lot of people when they think of LA, and especially they think of recording voiceover in LA, they go, "Oh, Burbank, Burbank." There are studios all over this county, and this county is
Yeah.
the size of Rhode Island and Delaware combined. It's
Mm.
one county. Those are multiple states. It's ludicrous. And so because of that, it's live where makes the most sense for you.
Yeah.
I was very, very fortunate to secure an apartment that has a bonus space downstairs that has its own washer dryer,
Oh, good.
and in this bonus space, it really is. It's a concrete floor, and then basically a largish box. So it was an ideal spot to stick my booth.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Um, and so people go, "Oh, is that a hallway to nowhere?" No, it's actually a set of back stairs. It's just horribly like lit.
Hallway to nowhere.
Yeah, I've
Um.
had a couple of friends go, "Hey, look, it's the hallway to nowhere." I'm like, "There are stairs."
But I'm actually interested because as someone who does remote work and also lives in LA, you got the best of both worlds on your shoulders. So I'm always interested, like, what has been like your experience doing both, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that I talk about it is very much, people think, "Oh, well, you're right there. You must work in studio so often." No, most of my work is still remote.
Yeah, remote's
Um,
still killing it out here.
yeah, I mean, this year, well, if you include when I worked on Shadowverse, which was last summer. So it's not quite been an entire calendar year yet between that session and now. So let's include that one. From then until now, I have worked in session a grand total of 3 times. And so the vast, vast, vast majority of work and all of my auditions and things like that are still done from home. And so I'm seeing the countdown. And
Yeah.
so the and so for me, and I know that this is in some ways also the experience of people who are living in Dallas and navigating that market. It's, yes, you have access to these things, but you still need to be engaging all of the other cylinders that you can as often as you can, purely because the work is so heavily distributed. And there are some projects where even if the developers or the publishers or whomever else are based mostly in one place, even if that place is the exact same spot where you are, everybody could still be working remotely.
Yeah.
Um, like all of the recording done for Cryptmaster was done remotely, with the exception of one person, I'm not sure who it was in the English cast, who went in studio. And those publishers are in LA. The developers are in England and New Zealand. Like
Oh,
it's
what?
it's
Oh wow, I
y-
don't know that. I need to find them.
yeah, no. Paul, who did all of the programming and a lot of art, and then was co-designer. He's Oriander. I'm not sure exactly where, but
No, I will find them. This country is very small.
you're just like swimming through rivers looking for Paul.
Honestly, I wouldn't put it past it. It's actually pretty feasible here.
Where are you? Yeah, no.
But yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that, is because a lot of voiceover work is usually comes from like direct like networking and marketing, and most of it is remote nowadays. So it's more like like being like there and capable of being in studio. It does help a lot, but like it's not everything, which is actually kind of good, kind of not. But like honestly, it means like more doors open to doing all kinds of stuff. And the fact that remote's more common now than well, I mean, I think the most common it was during the pandemic, but like it's still here. It's not here. It's not going anywhere, thankfully. As
Yeah,
I hope this
yeah.
ages. I hope this ages well. Because if it doesn't, fuck, you know.
Yeah,
But
I mean it's something where I feel like sadly as time continues to elapse and frankly more people develop long COVID who have had it multiple times, remote will eventually need to become more of a thing
yeah,
because it's if you suddenly have X percentage more of the population who's suddenly developed chronic fatigue, which I have naturally and have had for a long time, so I'm very accustomed to it. It's not something that you adjust to immediately, however. So it's oh, we do need these accessibility things in place. So my thought is, in an ideal world, I would love for the sort of beautiful hybrid work that we had in
yeah.
2020 through 2022. I'm not sure if it will ever really get back to that point, but I think in general, I mean, there's a level of accommodation for remote, at least insofar as, oh, we know that this is logistically possible.
Yeah.
So if you're in studio and your director is somewhere else, they might be able to see you. You may or may not be able to see them, but it's fine. Or, of course, everyone's just working from home, which is also a completely feasible possibility.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm telling you, man, COVID-20, that's gonna be gonna be great for remote voice actors. We should have find another rodent to make put her in the soup. So I'm calling it. It's gonna be COVID-20. Gonna be chipmunks. Then the road will be back on top. That's horrible. I'm sorry.
Why chipmunks, though? What have the chipmunks done to you?
I don't know, man. Like Alvin's gone away with too much. I can't.
He must be held responsible for his crimes.
Exactly. Like Simon and Theodore, like it's like videos where it's like blink twice if you want to escape. I've seen them blinking. They want to escape. Ah, but man, you know what? I actually grew up on the Chipmunks. That was like one of my first movies I remember watching because that came out in like the first one, the live action one, came out not
Oh,
the old
okay.
one. I meant
Yeah,
the
yeah.
live action one
Okay. Yeah,
with
because I
David
was like,
Cross.
wait, how does the math? Okay. Yeah.
Nah, it is. I was like 5 when I saw that. It was an experience. I I remember going to theaters for the Squeakquel and Chipwrecked. Then the fourth one came out. I was like, what? There's a fourth one? And then I saw that on a plane. So I was like, okay, great. But I don't know. Those movies will still hold a special place in my heart. But they're not the best things I've seen in my life. There's definitely better things. I remember going to like a video store in 2019, which is a crazy statement to say. That video stores still exist. But I remember seeing like a copy of Alvin and the Chipmunks 4, the road trip, and you know how it's like they'll sometimes put like reviews from like other people onto the box. One of the reviews was this has changed my life, and I'm like, how? How did it change your life? I really want to know more. How
I'm just morbidly curious.
it's like how did Alvin and the Chipmunks 4, the road trip, change your life specifically? What about it? I really want to know. You gave it 5 stars. Did it change your life? I want to know more. I don't want it to end there. My next question for you is, as someone who does theater and voiceover as well, what are like some of the things that like you can kind of take from both and apply to both in practice? Because you mentioned like the different kind of techniques like Stanislavski and Chekhov. I was able to try out Chekhov last year for a play, and I actually really enjoyed it. I like the embodying, and it just seemed to work really well for like the play we were doing. But you can actually apply it very well to voiceover. So sometimes when there's like stuff I'm struggling to like feel things, I will do a little bit of Chekhov in there and feel it out and then hop back right in.
Yeah.
But as someone who's been doing theater for probably longer than I have, what's like, some of the things you can kind of take from both and apply it.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I started hoarding theater knowledge with the understanding that I wanted to go into voice acting. But my approach was always acting is acting is acting, and exactly how you use these tools will differ based upon the context. But fundamentally, the core of it remains the same. What are you doing? You are living truthfully in imaginary circumstances, and I, I I would be willing to fight Sanford Meisner's ghost. I do not like that man, but I will steal that quote from him because I think it's very, very effective. Um, and uh, and so for me, a lot of how I work as an actor on stage and in voiceover is very much a blend of Michael Chekhov, some Alexander technique type things, because Alexander technique and Laban fit very, very nicely with Michael Chekhov shenanigans. And then a lot of Adler stuff as well. So I very much work outside in rather than inside out. Which for me was really the key to how can I consistently attain dual or divided consciousness, essentially use character brain, let the character drive my nervous system like a car in a way that is sustainable and in a way that doesn't make my real life brain go, oh no, you're about to dissociate, this is terrible, let's just immediately ground you back to reality, which is to regular reality, which is not useful when you're acting. Um, and so for me, it's very much, obviously a lot of what you're doing physically doesn't necessarily track the same way in just vocal performance, because if your entire performance as perceived is a 12-layer dip, you might only get the first 4 layers from just the vocal performance alone, but the remaining 8 are still there. And I think to me that's the real perk of, yes, being very precise about how you take these energetic and emotional pivots and being simultaneously deliberate and willing to act upon the character's impulse. um, I think both of those things are very valuable. And so for me, in my mind, how I delineate, theater versus video games versus ADR versus whatever else, it's basically just what are the technical needs of what we're doing and what are the stylistic needs of what we're doing. But fundamentally, mechanically, it's procedurally fairly close to being identical.
Oh yeah, that's good. Because I also do screen acting as well, and there's different things from voice, screen, and theater, and I feel like some of them go hand in hand, and some just go completely like off the wall. Because like screen or on camera acting, it's more grounded in that sort of reality. So you kind of have to pull back majority of the time. Whereas a lot of theater and voice acting, you can kind of go over the top. But there are like reads where the reality is more grounded, so you can kind of bring it back down. But a lot of the
Yeah,
time, it's sort of like played up. Well, I wouldn't say played up, but it's more extreme in terms of like their situations and what they're dealing with compared to like I don't know, like spilling a coffee on your business suit before going to a meeting or something. But
yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, I think part of that too is because I think honestly the copy that I work best with is the type of copy where you don't, because I mean I can handle big bombastic ridiculous copy, um, but a lot of what I think I am best suited for is the very finessed razor edge type things, because even though and the beauty of voiceover relative to something like theater is that if you need to just sort of um steep or ferment in that emotional beat for a second before you take the full pivot, you can in voiceover because they can just cut out the dead space.
True.
um and so I think for me, my difficulty in doing theater sometimes was you can't necessarily do the razor's edge things quite as well because of the nature of theater as needing to be legible at distance. Um, for on camera, my primary hang up was that a lot of the time traditional sort of philosophy requires you to work inside out rather than outside in, and that is not compatible with basically how I work as a person.
Yeah.
Um, and for voiceover, I mean, I'd say while I enjoy a lot of um, the work, regardless of style, I think where I am strongest remains the essentially I'm going to give you a long and drawn out warning, and this could be big and bombastic, but it's not, because it's going to have all of the fire and venom and nonsense, but only 5% of that is actually going to be visible, right? And so in terms of the energetic and emotional and sort of mental tension, the sort of interior tug of war. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of internal mobility that's happening there, but obviously for voiceover, it it lends itself better to video games than most other media types, I think, because it allows for a greater vector of expression at that very, very micro level, purely because it is such a multimedia discipline that you can get away with that, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you mention all that because I feel like the way you act and bring things, I think you have like more sort of like subtleties, like that nuance. You mentioned the 5% before, and I feel like for video games, I feel like that sounds about right because you and like because you kind of have to like play off of realism to some extent, so like if someone's angry, you're not gonna be like, that's not gonna be like the first response. Sometimes it's more complicated than that, and you have to like there's a lot of internal stuff you may have to deal with depending on what the situation is or how bad something happened to you, or maybe this is something that's been happening for a long time. Like how would the character respond to like that new information being present or old information being that's coming up again.
Yeah, and I feel like in some ways, even just vocally, I became acclimated to doing that a little faster than I potentially maybe I maybe could have avoided learning how to do that for a bit longer if I didn't realize that I'd be playing a lot of these, because you can play these as very, very one note, right? And it's I mean, obviously it doesn't sound right when it's just me speaking in it, because it's just like that's just some guy with speaking in the well, I'll call it the MILF cadence casually off of
No,
Twitter.
Jett, come on, Jett, don't call it the MILF cadence, please.
I don't call it that on Twitter. I always just call it that kind of mom energy. But some of my friends poke fun at me because it is very much my one party trick thing, because it's just loud enough to where it can carry. But if it's I'm playing a lot of these, and you can play these really one note and very, oh, you poor child. But how do you use that when it's you took everything that I ever loved away from me, right?
Mm.
And so, like, how do you use that archetype throughout the entirety of human emotional expression? And so I think, in some ways, understanding that, okay, in the grand canon of femme character archetypes, somebody with my voice print is going to play a lot of these. And so and so having to adapt to, oh, okay, I can do this, but how can I be a person in it, basically?
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, because you mentioned you play a lot of fame characters a lot. Is that right?
So I'm a mix of weird things. It's a lot of, so among femme characters, it's a lot of aristocrats, military commanders, women over 60, and then people with that kind of mom energy. For mask characters, it is a lot of smug and smarmy dudes, a fair smattering of kids, fair smattering of teenagers. And then, I mean, in terms of if we're going to imagine the most stereotypical non-binary voice print, it is unfortunately me. Um, which is, because for me, my philosophy is always that fundamentally you can't really parse gender from voice print.
Yeah.
And that for for me, and in knowing a lot of people, I mean, I have friends who are non-binary who might be more femme presenting and whose resting pitch is markedly higher than mine, but their energetic print is not that. And
Ah.
so for I mean, a lot of that is it's the same situation of even like cis men who are gay who get clocked vocally as not being straight, or that's the conjecture, or they've disclosed that in advance. And so then it's like, okay, is the feedback that I'm getting rooted in that? Or is it rooted in something that I'm actually doing? Because one of those things I have more control over than the other one.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, in terms of my regular speaking voice, it's like my regular speaking voice is basically just some guy um, who plays a lot of these. Or really, a lot of these, if I'm going to be very pedantic. And a lot of them are also vampires, because that's just how it
You know
goes.
what? I do hear it. I do hear the vampirism in there.
Yeah, it's the resting aristocrat vowels. I can't run away from them.
But I honestly, your range is very inspiring. I would say so, because like honestly, like it's just very unique to you, and like not a lot of people can like go that deep or go that high or have like those multiple like or play like those like multiple gender roles. So like it's very unique to you, and it's like it's genuinely very very cool. Like you say you're Schrodinger's Brit, but honestly you got that Schrodinger's range, dude. Like that's what that's what,
Yeah. It's funny because I know one other person who has a range comparable to mine, and she's trans femme, and
hmm.
we ended up in a D&D group together, and we realized, oh, we have the exact same connective tissue disorder. That's why we're like this.
Oh, okay, it all makes sense. It's all coming together.
Well, I mean I knew that was why my vocal range went brr, but it's like I'm slowly catching up with the Gen Z slang. Mm.
Wait, are you not Gen Z?
I I am, but barely, barely,
Barely.
and
So
and and
because
so
Gen
it is. Yes, my age is technically calculable. And
yeah.
so yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, and I mean, my general standpoint is, look, I'm an old man who looks like a teenage boy. Um, purely by virtue of I'm fairly tired most of the time, just because
Yep.
my body doesn't work very well. Um, but I mean, it's all right. It's all good.
That's interesting. I always thought you were younger than me this entire time.
No, I am definitely older than you.
Aw. I mean, in a interesting and weird way, but also a really cool way. It means at least you keep your dashing good looks for a longer time. No one can tell.
Yeah, so I mean, part of that, to be honest, as well, is just because of how my hormonal composition works, and then again, because my connective tissue is broken, I mean, it affects my skin as well.
Oh
So
yeah, fair. I mean, people assume I'm 35, but like I'm 22. It's just the beard, I
I
swear to
know,
God.
and that's so strange to me as well, because to my eye, even through the like visual downscaling, you look 22. You look like you're in your
Thank you,
early
Jett.
20s.
I appreciate it.
Um,
Thank you.
I have a friend at my local gym who is 26, and I think, I mean, well, his head is shaved because he started losing his hair early and was like, I'm not gonna hide this. I'm just gonna shave it off. And I was like,
Yeah.
all right, cool. But I honestly think it's just the beard that throws people off.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's just it, because he's like, look, I shave and suddenly people get my age right. But otherwise they're like, oh, are you 37? No, I'm 26. So
I just you sounded like Miss Piggy for a second. That was really funny. Well, probably like the Muppets and shit. Um,
yeah, no.
I wanted to ask because you've mentioned doing ADR and the stuff, and you've done work for anime such as like Ricket of Ragnarok and stuff like that. So like yeah, what was your anime experience like, my dude?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, when those first classes in studio, I was working with anime as my material, so I was very used to hearing Japanese preview, and then becoming an adult and working with live action ADR and working with Mandarin and Brazilian Portuguese and a few other things as well. Um, it's in a lot of ways it's very much like coming home, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because I was already familiar with that format. For Record of Ragnarok, that was all crowd walla stuff, so you don't even have to necessarily match lip flaps for that. Um, and so that was lovely. And then when I went in for Ishuda, that was a lot of walla work, and then also one named character. And so I recorded before the other major character in that scene. And so that was very lovely, because we in this case being myself and then Mike, who was directing, we got to sort of tinker around with things a little bit, and play with, making sure that everything completely fit in terms of the flaps, because sometimes, and this is something where, especially when folks talk about, oh, subs are better than dubs are better than subs. It's like, it doesn't matter. Just watch it however you want. But in terms of the workflow process, it's so interesting because, and this isn't a show-specific thing. This is just something that happens across the media type. For shows that have their audio recorded in Japanese after the product is already animated, people are working off of their eyes and off of time codes that are on their script, but they don't have beeps. And so sometimes the Japanese audio is not synced very well. And so what that means in terms of localization, and this is something that I've not experienced firsthand very much, but especially having friends who work in localization and who've done directing on things, it's fascinating when the original sort of Japanese audio is not synced, and so then the localized line is written to match the sort of syllable layout of the original, but then it doesn't quite fit. And so really, I think, my experience, I'm very thankful and grateful to everybody working in production for basically just making the actors' jobs so easy by the time we show up, because everything more or less fits. And if it doesn't fit, it's only going to be off by like a syllable. And so I've had a very positive experience working in those environments, but also, I mean, some of that has to do with the fact that if there's anime work that you're doing in LA, it's going to be union. And so what that means is that no matter what, everybody's getting paid minimums, and you are usually not working on a super strict simuldub schedule, which, I mean,
Yeah.
I understand why that is more of a thing, but it bums me out because it means that everybody is crunched. And if you aren't having enough time to go in and really refine the performances and make sure that things are working exactly how you want them to work, it's like, this is a piece of media that this is its final committed form. And so for everybody who came before you in terms of the workflow proceeding, my line of thought is, I understand that this isn't always logistically possible, but wouldn't you, given the resources, want to do the very, very best that you possibly could?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think for as much as it bums me out that there's less hub crossover between LA and Dallas for that media type, and between both hubs and remote, though there are folks out here who I know still do it, and I'm not super familiar with the Texas market, so I don't feel confident speaking on that.
No, that's fair. No worries.
And it's delightful to me when people can be included remotely, but also what that tends to mean as well, because including people who are recording remotely and in different recording environments, it often means that you are not working in those super duper 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 strict deadline windows.
Yeah.
Because if you can make the accommodations to have people in remotely, that means that you can make the accommodations to have more mixing time.
Yeah.
Meaning, everybody is probably going to be less crunched.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
I mean, my whinge is not necessarily about simuldubbing itself. It's just, it bums me out when people are crunched.
I
Because
mean,
then
it's I
yeah.
wouldn't call it a win. It's I think what you're asking was pretty reasonable if you ask me. Because like
Yeah, yeah.
for Japan, anime is sort of it's kind of treated how like pre animation is in the US and stuff like that, where you have like more time to once you record capture the performances in the anime on top of that. For dubbing, sometimes you'll get like time, but like it's if it depending on like but even just in general, right? Because this is like something that's being released to the public. If you give actors the time to not burn themselves out and do a good job, then fans or people who enjoy it, won't be like angry and they won't have like these sub and dub debates. I mean, even though that'll probably continue for like till
Yeah,
the
I
end
was
of
gonna
time.
say I mean, they're gonna do that regardless. Everybody
Yeah,
should just be doing the best that they can.
yeah,
That's all
but
we can do, really.
yeah, but like in terms of like anime and video games, because you've done like quite a lot, even animation as well. Are there like any franchises that you would like want to be a part of, like in the future, or like stuff that you really, really, really want to be in someday?
So I mean, my answer to the dream franchise question is what's your dream franchise? My dream franchise is to make cool things with good people.
Yeah,
Um,
good
and
answer.
it's a cop out answer, and it's like, well, wouldn't you love to work on XYZ? It's like, well, theoretically, yes, but I don't have any control over that. I don't have control over whether I see sides for that. And I don't have control over whether or not I'm booked for that. Sometimes you'll
True.
read for something, and you'll read for it, and read for it, and read for it, and then maybe 18 months down the line, you've auditioned on something else for that same client, and they go, oh, you can do vocal combat up there? Oh, come on, for this thing. And so, I mean, you really never know. So, I mean, for me, there are certain franchises that I grew up with and, that I would love to be able to at least work with copy from. But the great joy of modern technology is that it's like, look, if I want to work with modern Final Fantasy copy, I don't necessarily even have to wait for that to come to me. I can go and find it from stuff
True.
that's already been released. And even if it's not for work, I can still enjoy it. I can still have that moment, and I appreciate in some ways because I recently paid my FF14 sub again after not playing for about a year. And I forgot how fun it is that not all of the dialogue is voiced. And so if you want to cold read it, even just to yourself or to your cat or whatever else, you can. And so I mean I think in some ways the fact that I am very easily amused and very easily fulfilled
And
by
it's not a bad thing at all, actually.
yeah, by somebody wrote this and other people localized it. And now we get to see it, and that's really really cool. Um, I mean, I think that wards off a lot of the sense of, oh, will I ever get to, formally audition for XYZ thing? It's like, I don't know. I don't have that much control over that, but I can at least, exert control in areas where I would like to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Even if it's just, I'm gonna record this at home. I'm gonna tinker around with it. Maybe I'll even mix it. Who knows? I'm not gonna put it anywhere, but I at least have it.
That's fair. Like there are certain franchises I would love to be a part of, but honestly, for me, if I got the sides, that's more than enough for me. If I book it, that's even better, But if people, for me, it's like if I'm even considered enough to get like the audition sides, that just warms my heart,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like there's like the way I think about auditions is like temporarily or for that time when you are that
You get
character.
that character is yours for as
Yeah,
long as you are working on that audition. Yep,
exactly. And if
yep.
and if it's like if it's a canon event and it happens to be an actual character you book, then even better. It's
You
immortalized.
get to spend more time with them. You get to hang out again. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, my last question to you, Jit, is as a voice actor who's been doing this for a while, and even a theater actor and on screen, what's like? Do you have a piece of advice for people who are starting out, or even people in the midst of their journey?
I mean, I'd say, and this I mean, heck, I brought it up. Well, as of time of recording, it will be today in the States, the day after the Tony Awards, and there was a comment made after Dan Radcliffe won um, his first Tony of it is astonishing that the core trio from that franchise um, ended up being well-adjusted human beings. And someone else brought up that Chris Columbus, who directed the first, I think, two films, very, very deliberately sought out actors who had extremely strong support systems on a familial level, on a friend level, and on an academic level. And so that, I think, dovetails very, very nicely into my key piece of advice is that if you are going into an industry that is highly volatile, in which your employment is not consistent, in which it is easy to conflate your sense of worth with your work in ways that even surpass the normal risk of that occurring, because it can happen really in any job, it is not mandatory by any means, but I would argue it certainly helps to go and put in the work to understand, okay, how does my brain work? How does my emotional state work? What do I need to do to take care of myself? And so for me, people go, oh, well, you only started working in earnest in 2020. Your first classes that you ever took were in 2013. What happened? And what happened is, I needed more time to be a person, and I did a lot of things in the interim. But one of the things that I did in the interim was that I went to therapy for a bunch of years and figured out very effectively, okay, this is how my brain works. This is how to cool it off when the brain piranhas start going. And, fundamentally, it's how can we be solutions focused when things get a little bit wacky, right? And so I think for people going into the field, if they're going into it because I really, I wanna be in games and I wanna be an XYZ thing, and they don't necessarily consider those elements, I think it can be very, very difficult, because suddenly it's, well, what am I doing wrong? Right? What am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. As long as you are still auditioning and frankly deriving joy from the process rather than the ephemeral sporadic booking, you are doing the absolute best that you can. Because we don't control the true result. And even in terms of what we record in session, in some ways we don't control the true end result. We can only do the absolute best that we can. And so learning how to deal with that sense of uncertainty and extremely high level of dynamism in a way that makes sense for you, I think is of paramount importance.
Very,
So
very.
that's my long-winded answer.
Hey, that was a very wise words. That actually struck a chord with me because I've actually been going to therapy since March, and it's helped so much. Like I'm happy I'm able to you know, take control emotionally. This sort of like stay young. I say I'm young, but like people say I'm old, so I'm like I don't know. This
You're
young,
22.
this
You're
young
22.
this young stage of my life, you know. But yeah, I like therapy is very important. So like if you're in the field and you want to seek therapy, like it genuinely does help, and it's not, it's not a weakness, because in this industry, like it's really easy to like always be validated by affirmations, and when you don't get that, you always think about the negative outlook and stuff, so really, so kind of like taking a step back, finding out what your loves in your life are, and be proud of yourself no matter what you do or what you don't do. you know I think that's the most important thing you can do as a voice actor, but also as a person. Yeah, and with that, this interview comes to a close. Jett, thank you so much for this interview. It's been very insightful and very, very fun having you on. Um,
Yeah, thank you.
and I was gonna ask, like, which voice actors would you like to see in the OverVoice hot seat next?
So I would love If hmm, trying to think. I have a couple of friends who I would love to recommend, except that I know they don't like being on camera.
That's all good.
Um,
I can also I've recorded people with their screens off, so like that's all good.
okay.
Yeah.
So then, well, all right. I'll throw one of them in, but I will also just pull up my hello. Yes, the lighting has changed. So I would like to suggest, uh, Aidan Rudd, Sina Breyer, Michael Schwalbe, John Patnode, uh, and Kelsey Jaffer.
Oh.
Off the top of my head, mostly because it's they're all sort of an interesting combination of folks who come from very, very different backgrounds in some cases. Some have the more predictable actor trajectory, some very staunchly don't. I don't know. I think all of them are lovely human beings.
Hell yeah. I think I know all of them except Aiden. I don't think I've spoken to Aiden before, but apart from Aiden, I think I've spoken to everybody else. So not an interview, but like in DMs and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'll definitely think about having them on this season or maybe next season. We'll see. Those I would love to
yeah,
have them on. They all seem lovely. But yeah, Jet, are there any where can people find you? Do you have any social media or anything that you want to plug?
sure.
I'll put it all in
Uh,
the description.
Sure, absolutely. So, my Twitter profile is at Barker Voiceover, all one word, Barker voiceover. I periodically stream on Twitch under the handle Jett Barks. Um, I well, I mean, my website, if you want to be overly formal about trying to find me, is just jettbarker.com. And then I very rarely use TikTok. I technically have it. I don't really know how it works, but my
I,
handle
I follow you on TikTok. They bring me joy.
my handle on there should just be my name, Jett Barker. Um, but yeah, I mean it's been lovely chatting and hanging out and
Yeah.
I hope that you've derived at least some mild amusement from it.
Hey, I've enjoyed myself very much because we've spoken back and forth before on social. So but it's finally nice to like speak to you face to face, but not really face to face,
Yeah,
virtually face to face.
long form communication.
Exactly. Thank you so much again for coming on, and I'll see you guys next time for the next interview. Bye bye, everybody.